All right. As an executive advisor and inclusive workplace culture consultant, Stacy anchors action using change management principles while facilitating mindset shifts. Okay, you can hear. Okay, great. She combines nearly 2 decades of recruiting, career development, diversity, and workplace culture to focus on reworking how companies work, including how they inclusively recruit, hire, and engage employees effectively, creating inclusion and belonging for all. The founder of Rework Work and author of popular DEI book, Unbiased, Addressing Unconscious Bias at Work, Stacy has been published in Forbes, Fast Company, Harvard Business Review, and the Los Angeles Business Journal, and her unconscious bias course was the #1 most watched course on the LinkedIn Learning platform. And with that said, the stage is yours, Stacy.
Thank you. All right, so, oops. Now I'm having a little technical issues, doing the wrong thing. Too many windows open on the computer. You can relate to that, I'm sure. Hello to everyone. I am going to give a bit of a shout out to Renee and Lisa because I saw your names in Los Angeles. So thanks for repping LA. Raquel and Sandy, I saw you in Sacramento. You're in California, so, hey to you too. Just want to say hello to everyone, though, from around the country who is joining us. As you can see, I love to joke. I know this is supposed to be a serious topic, and it is. It absolutely is. But I always say it might be serious, but it doesn't have to be boring. So today we are talking about how we are going to move beyond workshops when it comes to DEI. And I thought that a really great way for us to do that, especially we're in the shifting landscape right now. There's a lot of flux, a lot of things happening. And so I thought,
Stacy, I'm sorry, we are seeing your the others, like the speaker preview, not the full version.
oh, well, thank you for letting me know that. Let's
Yes,
see.
no worries.
I'm just like, let's do that. Does that work?
No, it's still the
No.
same. Yeah.
Hmm. See, I'm telling you, speaker issues today. What is that about? I literally have Zoom is doing weird things. It is showing me that I'm sharing. Let's try that.
That's it. Looks good.
I don't know what that's about, but it's okay. As you can all tell, it's like the Wizard of Oz. Of course, I have notes behind the curtain. But that's because I am a speaker that a lot of times I will go off track. And if I don't give myself notes to keep us on track, we'll be talking about my children and other things, which I can usually relate it back to DEI. So that I can do. But thank you. And please, again, if anyone has a question while we're talking that is relevant to a slide in the moment, and that question makes sense, Danielle, feel free to just jump in like you just did and say, hey, actually, can I ask you this question? I have no problem with taking questions on the fly in that moment, because sometimes that just makes more sense. With that being said, I know that a lot of our DEI initiatives are being met with skepticism. So I'm actually really excited, right, to see the number of people that are on today's session because we've got a lot of resistance, we've got a lot of scrutiny, and sessions like the one today are helpful for helping us to raise awareness. And I think that we have to be thinking about how we are going to look at the structures that affect how we perceive others and that guide our behavior. And that's really what we're trying to do. So change is going to happen when organizations take sustained and authentic action. And the authentic part is what matters because we've seen a lot of action that we all know has not been authentic. And so we ignore it. And I think that there's been a lot of politicizing of DEI. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, not from a politics standpoint, just simply from how do we overcome some of the things that are, coming up for us as we do this work. And we've got to focus on the outcomes that we seek. So I really wanted to start with something that we all have to contend with, and that is the talent shortage. And you might say, well, Stacy, what does that have to do with DEI? And it actually has quite a lot to do with it because there's a lot of opportunity for marketing professionals to authentically engage And if we don't do that, we're going to have an issue. So I'm going to address why Gen Z is important for the workplace, as well as what you can do to keep the bottom line in mind, right? We always got to think about money, capitalism, right? But we don't want to come across as capitalistic and insensitive without care for others. So how do we do that in this changing landscape that we're in? So if you are in a space where you're having to recruit, even if you're not recruiting specifically, you've probably had to hire, you have people on your team, and you're wondering, why is it so difficult to find the right people for the right position at the right time? And that has to do with this talent shortage. As you can see, we are at a point where 75% of companies, not just in the United States, but globally, this is a global um, talent shortage that we are dealing with. And you're going to see that, there's a lot of different industries, but some industries are doing a little bit better, some are doing a little bit worse, but when it averages out, we're at 75%. And so what that means is that we're having trouble hiring, and retention is also a big thing, but you can't retain people if you haven't hired them in the first place, right? Like that is going to be difficult. So there's a lot of reasons for this talent shortage. And part of your role, again, even if you're not specifically in charge of recruiting, you got to be thinking about this because it's going to affect the way that you work with recruiters when you do need to hire people on your team. And it also is going to affect the way that you are interacting and what you're going to be able to do to retain individuals. So part of the issue is there is a big skills gap. And the skills gap is this disparity, right, between the skills that an employer actually thinks that employees should have and the actual skills that they do have. And so when we think about like McKinsey put out a report and they said that as many as 375 million workers globally are going to have to change occupations to meet company needs. So there's a big chasm between how your workforce is working today and where it actually needs to be in a few years. If you think about the fact that there are people in jobs today that did not exist 10 years ago, how do you prepare for a job you don't know is going to exist in 10 years from now? And that's part of the challenge that we have to deal with. So we have to upskill, right? Leaders have to retrain and grow the capabilities and the skills of their workforce. It is called upskilling. It is something that has to happen. And a lot of companies don't want to invest the time and the energy that is needed to actually do this. That makes no sense to me, but this is where we're at, right? This is part of the challenge, it's what we are dealing with. And so when like additional statistics here, right, we look at just this idea that we have employees when they trust that their colleagues, that people they're working with are going to actually see them, treat them fairly, regardless of their race, gender, sexual orientation, ability, right? So a lot of people right now talking, um, neurodivergency has come up a lot. And that is another big issue that we are dealing with. These are things that we have to be paying attention to. And when people feel that they're being listened to, that they're authentically being heard, then they are going to be much more likely to look forward to coming to work. Now, 10 times more likely to look forward to coming to work. I don't know about you, but if you get the Monday blues, that's because you probably don't like your job. And I'm gonna say it again. If you get Monday, or even the Sunday night blues is really what it is. It's very likely you do not like your job. You do not want to go on Monday morning. It's not about you being lazy. It is about the idea that the job isn't fulfilling something for you. You want people to have pride in their work. This is huge, right? People to want to tell people about where they work, how they work, what they're doing. You want your employees to be ambassadors, your marketing folks, right? You want people to be marketing on your behalf and telling people how great it is to work in this workplace. You don't want them telling people that it sucks to work there. And that's happening a lot, right? Which then in turn feeds into the difficulty to recruit and retain. It's this cycle that happens. And so, people want to actually stay at their companies. There's this perception that younger generations, they don't want to work. They're not interested. They're not ambitious. That, they just want to flit about and do nothing. But that's not true. They actually want these things. The problem is that it's being made more difficult to obtain those things within the workplace. So what the really staggering number on here is that 62% of employees, or I guess candidates, would turn down a job offer if it came from an organization with a non-diverse culture, right? Or a culture that doesn't care about diversity, or a non-inclusive culture, however you want to say that. But 62%. That's a really big number. I mean, I'm belaboring the point, but that's more than half, right? So if you just think about this for a minute, if you put out a job offer, there is a higher than 1 in 2 likelihood that that person will say no to your job offer if you have not demonstrated that where they're going to work is a place that is actually going to accept them. That's huge because that means that you spent a lot of time and energy. Your recruitment team spent a lot of time and energy. You spent money, right? Weeks, because it also, the time to fill has increased up to over 12 weeks, right? So you're taking more than 3 months to find a candidate and send out an offer. And then they say no. And you got to start all over again because you go to number 2 and that number 2 person has accepted a job from your competitor and they're not available anymore, right? And then you start going down the list and then you say, oh, let's just start over, right? This is huge. This relates to DEI in the workplace because when people, and I say we, because at this point, I don't know if you haven't noticed, but I'm Black. I'm also female. I'm a mom. These are 3 things that sometimes make it very difficult for me to get a job. And so these are things that I pay attention to when I am, well, if I should say, because I don't anymore, but if I were looking for a job, these are things that I would pay attention to. But they are things I counsel others to pay attention to. Just this week, my own sister-in-law reached out and said, "Can you help me? My resume needs fixing." So again, see, this is where I go off track. These are things that I do that can help, and I understand the importance of this, but I'm belaboring this point because you're going to see as I keep going through this, there is such a big disconnect between what people want and what leaders want. And I don't understand why we can't seem to bring the two together. So my goal today is to help, right, to bridge this gap, close the chasm, and make this make sense. Part of that is looking at untapped talent pools, because again, we have this huge global talent shortage. I am but one person. I'm not about to go against the numbers that are out there and say, of course, we don't have a talent shortage. I get it. We have a talent shortage of sorts, but it's a talent shortage of our own making because there are huge groups of talent pools that we do not consider. We have overlooked. We consider them not qualified. We don't pay attention to them. So and I'm using really small numbers here, if we have a pool of 100 people, but really we're only looking at 20 of them because the other 80 we've decided are not even worth looking at. We haven't even checked to see if they have the skills. That's a problem, right? Because now we don't have 100 people to look at. We only have 20. And then out of that 20, we're going through weeding down. And this is what's happening when we're not tapping into talent pools. So if we think about the fact that there's 21% unemployment among military spouses and partners, but 92% of that pool is mostly women. That's why it says, spouses. 92% of them are women in their prime working years who want to work. We also say that, who want to work. They are not women who want to be stay-at-home moms. They actually want to work. They're not able to work, though, because they don't have the flexibility that is needed to allow them to work. So again, we talk about, if any of you have been following me on LinkedIn, I've been talking a lot about this return to the office mandate that I absolutely hate. I think it's short-sighted and is going to continue to exacerbate this problem that we have of a talent pool gap. So here are women who could absolutely do the job, could do it well, and are actually more credentialed, have degrees, right? But they're sitting at home because someone decided that they didn't want to hire them because they don't want them to work from home. Right? We have this whole come back into the office. So that's a problem. Here's this group of people that are unhireable based upon basically an arbitrary decision that a leader has made. We also have people who are disabled, people with disabilities. 7.2% unemployment, which is double that of people without a disability, right? 7.2% unemployment. And nearly 25% of Americans have some type of disability. So again, that is a very large pool of people that we are not paying attention to. We also have people with criminal records, and you immediately go, what? No, I'm not hiring a criminal. Yeah, but have you really thought about, well, what are the parameters around that? Do you care that somebody, has a small petty crime if they're not going to be dealing with money? They're not working in a bank, right? There's certain things where we have to start, rather than blanket say, I will never hire anyone with any kind of a criminal record. We actually have to look and say, does it matter? If I am hiring warehouse workers, does it matter if they show up on time and they do their job, right? We have to really look at this. And so it's really terrible that 64% of unemployed men in their 30s have a criminal record. 64%. Now, that also is a testament to our harsh laws, to certain things that probably should not be crimes that people have been penalized for, right? There's a whole conversation we can have about that, which we will not have today. But the idea is that there are a number of people that, again, are being overlooked. So if you take all of these people, this is just 3 talent pools, there are others. That's a lot of people that are being ignored and overlooked when it comes to hiring. But yet, we have a talent shortage. So I wanted to talk about attracting and retaining Gen Z because, again, they are a generation that demands genuine, authentic representation. And they're only going to support brands that align with their values. So I'm going to address a little bit later how we can reconnect with our foundational why and how we can navigate the complexities of DEI and start to really engage these diverse audiences effectively. But Gen Z is a bit of an anomaly because leaders who generally tend to be older and more set in their ways are really struggling to connect the dots. There is a huge disconnect. And an example that doesn't really relate to this right now, but I just want to give you an example of the disconnect. I did a presentation for LinkedIn's Talent Connect show, their summit, which is all of the top talent acquisition leaders around the world who come in to LinkedIn for this program. And one of the things we talked about ad nauseum was AI. And again, if you think about the skills gap that I mentioned, right, and the fact that there are lots of jobs that are out there that are going to be created in the future that we really don't even know how to prepare for today. But one of the things that came up was the fact that 92% of leaders expect that AI is going to increase productivity and make them all this money, right? They're so excited about AI. 92%. Yet it was like less than 40% of employees actually feel as though they are prepared, that they have been given resources, and that they have been taught how to effectively use AI. So here we have, again, this huge disconnect. Executive leaders are going, this is awesome. We can't wait to see the added productivity. Meanwhile, the employees are saying, yeah, but you've given us nothing. You have not trained us. You haven't given us resources. You haven't explained what we're supposed to do. You just have these unrealistic expectations that all of a sudden AI is here and poof, ta-da, we're going to be productive. So this is what we're talking about when I say there is a big disconnect in so many different areas that relate to things that touch your jobs. I'm quoted in LinkedIn's annual Future of Recruiting report, which was released last month, as saying that Gen Z won't compromise their principles for a job. And they won't. So if you want to succeed in attracting and retaining this segment of your workforce, because as you can see here, attracting and retaining is the second largest challenge that people have noted. And again, LinkedIn does these surveys. They have over 1 billion accounts at this point. They have a lot of data at their fingertips. So when they say these are numbers, I believe that, right? Attracting and retaining Gen Z is the second biggest challenge for folks in the next 5 years. And so, yes, this is specific to recruiters, but again, this is for your company, because who is the recruiter recruiting for? They're recruiting for your team. They're recruiting for your department. They're recruiting to ensure that your function, right, that you have the right people in the right place at the right time. So if we can't attract and retain Gen Z, we have a big problem. And if you want to succeed, then you are going to have to understand where Gen Z is coming from. And I find it really ironic, again, this gap, that employers are struggling to retain Gen Z, because what I'm seeing is that Gen Z employees are actually being fired at extremely high numbers after being employed for less than a year, and in many cases, less than 6 months. And the reasons that leaders are citing, or managers, I should say, in this moment, that they're citing is that they're saying that Gen Z folks are unprepared and unprofessional. So I ask the question, who is supposed to prepare them? Right? Who? If not you, then who? There was a time when apprenticeships were offered. Companies understood that they needed to train new hires into their way of working, and that employees needed ramp up time. Now they want people to show up, do the job, be ready to work immediately. And I'm not sure who set this unrealistic expectation and why it has stuck, but it needs to change. We also have this word unprofessional, which, again, I've always had an issue with the word unprofessional because, what does unprofessional mean? Or what does the word professional mean? In every workplace, the word professional is sometimes used usually to denote a sign of respect. If you're being professional towards me, I mean, I feel like you're respecting me. But as soon as someone says something that you don't agree with, or that you don't like, or that they're disrespectful to you in some manner in your mind, right, then they are unprofessional. And so I think that we really have to think about how we use the word unprofessional and what that means. It's sort of a catch-all for a number of perceived transgressions. And I feel like it needs to be unpacked, it needs to be explained, and it needs to be used sparingly. So additional things that are coming up too for Gen Z is they're being identified as having a lack of motivation, a lot of communication issues, and rejection of current work-life balance. But you're going to see in the next couple of slides why that is. But I also just want to say that I think when we have all, I'm just going to make a blanket statement here and say we have all experienced burnout. You get tired, you get fed up, you're like, why am I even doing this? And Gen Z has watched their parents get used up and discarded in the workplace. So no, they're not in a hurry to have that happen to them, right? They're not signing up for this with gusto. And so what you're seeing is that for many Gen Z folks, they want an inclusive workplace. Less than 50% of them say that their boss actually helps them to maintain a healthy workload, right? Less than 50%. 28% of them say that they are struggling with mental health because of their boss. And 65% of undergrads would not apply to a job if the employer's values don't align with theirs. Very similar to that initial statistic, right? I said 62%. If it isn't a workplace that has, DEI in mind. This is why I say this is a DEI issue. We're talking about talent and we're talking about how we work with folks, but it's all about DEI. So when we look at work-life balance, again, they don't want to come into a place where they're going to be burned out and used up and discarded once their usefulness is over, right? So they want work-life balance. I don't know about you, but I want work-life balance too. I absolutely want it. I am not mad at them. I am really not. And I don't understand people who are, because I'm like, don't you want this too? Don't you want work-life balance? 78% of undergrads saying that having a sustainable work life is essential to their definition of career success. So that means also they have redefined the word professional. What's professional for them? Work-life balance is professional for them, right? 80% of undergrads are highly or somewhat worried about burnout once they start a professional career, and they should be. They absolutely should be, because they can see the writing on the wall and they're not in a hurry to be subjected to that. We're also in this place where, again, the workplace flexibility matters. We we're in a space. Granted, we were thrown into it unexpectedly. It wasn't something that we wanted. We did not want to be in a pandemic where everyone was working from home. And again, I say everyone, but that was not true. At its height, only about 40 to 45% of people were actually working from home, working remotely. That still leaves 35% of people who still had to get up and go into a building, right? Service workers, etc. So it's very misleading when we say, like, oh, there's this, that everyone was working from home, because they weren't. And I always just like to make that point. And so here we are now, though, in a space where we are insisting that everyone come back to the office. I have been blasting 3M, and I apologize if there's anyone here on the call who works there. But, 3 years ago, they put out this wonderful statement. They did this whole campaign that said, you can work your way. You can work from anywhere you want. We don't care about where you work. We care about how you work, right? We care about you getting the work done. And then 3 years later, to the day, almost, it was like October of this year, they said, oh, yeah, sorry, just kidding. We need you back in the office. You have people that are living all around the world who have now been told, come back to the office. And so you have people quitting left and right, but yet you want to complain about retention. Again, this disconnect, it makes no sense. Oh, we have a retention problem. But by the way, we're going to do all of these things that make it really difficult for you to work here. We cannot talk out of both sides of our mouth. That is not authentic action. That is not authentic leadership. So the workplace flexibility is important because we got used to that. It was a really great thing. It was like the veil got lifted and we said, oh my goodness, why have we been working like this? This makes no sense. Why have I been in my car doing a 90-minute commute each way to a job that I don't even like that much? Right? Why was I doing this? Why am I missing my children's bedtimes? Why is it that I can't actually grocery shop during the week because I can't make it to the grocery store? So I'm eating fast food every day, right? We have this unhealthy lifestyle, all of these things that were able to be fixed, resolved themselves with some workplace flexibility. And now companies are saying, yeah, no, we don't want you to have that. This is huge. This is not just about Gen Z, even though this is about Gen Z in the moment. And then, of course, skill development. So I've, again, talked about the fact that this is important. There's a skills gap. 87% of undergrads say that learning and development benefits are important to them, or actually essential when evaluating a job opportunity. So they are looking to go into companies where they value learning, where they value growth, where they are teaching. Going into a company where they're not going to teach you how to prepare for the next job of the future doesn't make any sense, because you're going to be out of a job and unskilled in a couple of years. So these are just, again, a few more statistics to get you to realize that paying attention to this is a fast way to put you as head and shoulders above your competition, because the competitors aren't doing it. The competitors are doing the old way of things. They're saying, come back to the office. We don't want flexibility. We're not going to train you. We're going to, chain you to your desk and make you do all of these things without any real resources. If you don't do that, I mean, the bar is really low, people. It is really low. It is not that difficult for you to actually do a couple of things that put you head and shoulders above your competitors. And of course, competitive pay, a high starting salary makes them more likely to apply to a job, but we all know that pay is not a retention metric. It might be a hiring metric, but it's not a retention metric, right? So I gotta ask, what is your why, right? This new generation that's in the workplace, they are demanding genuine representation. And I talked about the values alignment. I really think it's interesting because my own children, so I have a 21-year-old and a 22-year-old, and a 14-year-old, and they will not eat at McDonald's anymore. And I need you to understand how huge this is, because these are children who, if I brought home McDonald's every day, they would be happy. They would have been so excited. They loved McDonald's. They ate McDonald's like it was going out of style. Okay. Now, please don't judge me on my parenting or how much fast food they ate. All right. But they ate a lot of McDonald's because they loved it. They will not eat it. And that is huge. It is, I mean, to understand that their values alignment right now is absolutely not, they are not getting a dime of our money. They will not eat at McDonald's. And you need to understand that how important that is for your brand. What is your brand doing that is turning off folks? They won't eat at Starbucks either, or drink at Starbucks, right? Like Starbucks is gone. Starbucks is dead in our house. So no McDonald's, no Starbucks. There's others, but I'm just saying those are two big ones. I never thought I would see the day that McDonald's would be something that my kids would refuse to eat. So this is important because when we think about like they decided on what their value was and they turned McDonald's off like that, dropped them like a bad habit. And so you got to ask yourself, what brand or what thing are we doing that is going to cause people to do this to us? Because they absolutely will. And I know there's conversations about cancel culture and all of that, but it's not about cancel culture, it's about values alignment. And so I have to ask you, like, why are you here today? Right? Think about this for a moment. Why did you decide to show up and join today's session? What was important for you? So I'll tell you why I'm here. Because I feel very strongly about a number of things, as you can probably tell. But the question is, what do you feel strongly about, right? And I think that whether you agree or not on somebody else's courage of conviction, I think that it's very good to have values that matter and that you are not going to bend on. And so the question is, what do yours look like? So for me, right, I want to see actual change in organizations. I do this work and I show up even on days when I am frustrated and tired and really want to just say, you know what, why am I bothering? I remind myself that I want to see actual change. This is why I continue to show up. I want to create workplaces that work for all, not just for Black people, not just for people with a disability, not just for gay people, but for everyone. That means white men, that means white women. That means queer people, right? It means everybody. And that's what I spend my time focusing on. I also want my daughters. As I said, I have 3 of them. I want them to be accepted at work, not just tolerated. I don't want to be tolerated, and I don't want tolerance for my children either. And that's a different type of workplace culture, right? I want an inclusive workplace culture. And obviously, I want to make a difference. I want to see change. That's what I want, right? I know why I do this work. So, my question for you, and I figured I'd help you get through this because you might not really know, right? You might be here and going, well, I kind of know I want to do something, but I don't really know. So, couple of questions, right? Because I really do want to know your why, but you don't have to tell me. I want you to, this is going to be your own little project that you're going to work on. And you're going to take this and you're going to take this outside of today's workshop. So if you have a pen or take a screenshot, but I want you to focus on this because someone asked me, right, about measuring DEI efforts. And you can't have change without first understanding where you have begun, and that does require data. It's why I do use a lot of LinkedIn statistics because they have so much data at their fingertips. Like between Google and LinkedIn, the amount of data that they have is staggering, right? So introspection is never fun. No one ever likes to look and say, what did I do wrong? What could I have done differently? How can I be better? Kind of sucks to say that, yeah, we are fallible and not always very nice people. Um, but if we are going to succeed in making workplaces work for everyone, then you're going to have to answer some of these questions. So the thing is that on my team at Rework Work, I have a neuroscientist, and she has helped with taking the content that we have and really making sure that things stick. And so one of the things she says is right is that people who describe their goals are anywhere from 1.2 to 1.4 times more likely to successfully accomplish their goals. So if you want to accomplish a goal, you need to write it down. Having it in your head is great, but if you don't write it down, it's probably never going to happen. And it's a pretty big difference in goal achievement just by writing your goals down on a piece of paper. And that's why taking a screenshot is all well and good so you can write it later, but you literally need the action of writing the goals because it cements it into your brain. Again, I'm not a scientist. I can't explain it. Kendall is, and she probably could, but she's not here. So, and you had me. But writing it down is going to help you. It's why sometimes you write things down that you want and you put it on a sticky note and then you put the sticky notes all around your house, right? But it's like every time you write it down, it's helpful. And then there's the reminder of it. So this is called encoding, right? It is a biological process by which the things that we perceive are analyzed by the brain. That is Kendall's words. And decisions get made about what information that we should keep and what information we should discard because we have so much information in our brains. It's constantly going, do we need this? Do we need that? I don't know if we need this. And so if you don't write it down and encode it, your brain is going to go, couldn't have been that important. And it's gone, right? So this is why we have used this technique in my unconscious inclusion program, because we want to make sure that people are encoding this and that they are actually making change. Because as I told you, what is one of the things I want to see? I want to see change in organizations, positive change in organizations, because we've seen a lot of negative change. I don't want to see that. I want to see positive change. So let's review for each of you, right? You first need to write down your why. Why does this matter? Why are you here? Why do you care? What is the answer to that? I don't know. You're not going to have time to do it all right now. You're going to do it later, but you're going to write down your why. Why does this matter? You're also going to write down your what. What is your goal? What are you trying to accomplish? Right? What is the goal that you want in your team, in your workplace, in your department? What's the goal? In your personal career, right? What is the goal? And then how can you make it happen? So not only how can you make it happen, but how can you change or influence others to make it happen? Because especially if you're looking at a broader, larger goal, something for your department or a team, you are probably going to have to change or influence some kind of policy. So what is it going to take, right? How can you make this thing happen? And then who? Who can make it happen? Yes, you, but sometimes it's not you, right? It might be that you need to partner with somebody and see who do you need to go talk to help to make the why, the what, and the how happen. And then you got to think about the path in the future. So paths, what have we tried before? Sometimes we look at, oh, we did that before and it didn't work. And then that's it. That's not enough. Not only do you need to look at what have you tried before, but you need to see, well, what worked? Because there are things that did work. And then you got to look at what didn't work. And then you have to ask yourself, why didn't it work? And then you have to revise. Because then you get to the future, which is what we want. We want, like, what would change for you if you were successful in reaching your goal? What would make this, like, how would things be better for you if you were able to reach the goal? What would that future self look like? And then keeping that in mind is what's going to help you to make it through this process when things get hard, because things will get hard. They always get hard, right? It's difficult. But the sad fact of the matter is we have spent a lot of money to get very little results. And that's partly because people have not done the exercise that I just asked you to do. And it's also partly because we've had a lot of people who jumped into DEI work, saw that there was money and said, "Ooh, I'm going to get me some of that." And really were not thinking about the fact that they wanted to see positive change. So McKinsey reported that $8 billion is spent in the US alone per year. That number is so staggering. I was like, that must be a lie. I don't even know where they came up with that number. But again, I'm assuming McKinsey did their, their research correctly. Chief put out an article that stated that 70% of white male leaders don't engage in DEI at work. And not necessarily because they don't want to, although I'm not sure about that anymore based upon our election results. I'm just being real, right? But the prevailing belief is that DEI practitioners made a lot of white male leaders feel as though they weren't welcome. And that's interesting to me because I think it is one of the main reasons that people reach out to me specifically when it comes to DEI work, because my style of working with people is to, pull people in, to welcome them. I don't shame, I don't judge, I don't blame, right? This is a space where it's very purposely created to be able to be safe, but also brave. And these topics have to engage everyone. As you've seen, that's why I started with talent, because that impacts everyone. But that talent shortage issue, that is a DEI issue. So the Washington Post also noted that CDO, Chief Diversity Officer, hires tripled, right, at the largest publicly traded companies in 2020, tripled. But we also know that since then, those same roles have been limited in scope, they have been reduced in number, and they have been altogether removed, especially in the last couple of weeks, right? DEI has just gone out the window. So what I think is really important is I always remind people of their individual responsibility to address DEI in the workplace. So you want to have authentic action. We spend a lot of time looking at other people and pointing out their flaws. What we don't like to do is hold a mirror up to ourselves and say, well, how could I contribute to this? How might I have done something differently? How can I make change? And so you only have control over yourself, right? And to some extent, the teams that you lead, but for the most part, you have control over your actions. So this means that you have to pay attention to your thoughts, your behaviors, your perception of others. And inclusion without I doesn't make sense. So I'm a big proponent of inclusion. Inclusion is a thing we need to do, bring everybody together. You think about it, but if I am not included, then we don't have inclusion, right? You can't be an inclusive leader without fulfilling and understanding your role in this, your individual role. So which pathway is yours, right? What I have up here is pathway up the mountain. Same pathway up the mountain, sort of, maybe, right? I think that we think about this path and we have to think, are we on the side of meritocracy? So do you believe that if you work hard, you'll get ahead? Do you agree with the politicians who are attempting to remove DEI and move to MEI instead? And if you're unsure what I'm referring to when I mention MEI, it's the belief that DEI is only about quotas and promoting people of color. And their argument for trying to dismantle DEI is that we really should be paying attention to merit, excellence, and intelligence, which presupposes that we haven't been doing that all along and is frankly disgustingly insulting. Because DEI has never been about just handing people's jobs based upon their genitalia or the color of their skin, right? So, but back to my question. Which pathway is yours, right? Which of these roads did you take to get to the pinnacle of career success? Do you believe that you have been as successful as you are in your career based solely on your hard work? Do you look at others who aren't as successful as you and assume that they're lazy, not as ambitious, didn't work as hard? Otherwise, they would be where you are too, right? If that's the case, you are utilizing a meritocracy argument, which again completely disregards and ignores the fact that not everyone comes from the same starting point, right? And don't have the same road to travel to reach this destination. Some roads are paved, right? Some are not. If your road is paved, it's a lot easier for you to make it up that mountain. Some roads have escalators. Some roads actually have cars on them that will help them get up the mountain. Some roads are like the ones on the left. And so we have to ask ourselves before we criticize people and we condemn and we judge and make judgments about where they are in their career and how they got there, right? We have to really be asking ourselves, which pathway did we take? And which starting point was ours, right? Did I start further up this road than somebody else? So, as you know, I am a DEI practitioner and I absolutely 100% will continue to believe in DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. It is so necessary. But I believe that we do have to tweak the way that we're doing the work. And now we're going to have to, because of a lot of the mandates and things that are happening, things are changing. So we're going to have to figure out like what are the tools and the avenues that we have to navigate this new pathway that we're on. And the thing is that there are tools out there. I think the problem is we are afraid to try new things. We'd rather continue doing what we've always done, even though we don't have great results, right? It's the reason we've spent $8 billion a year on DEI training, because it was just easier to spend the money and look like we were doing something than actually do something. So it's a definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again. We're like, well, let's just keep doing workshops. We'll just do another workshop. Oh, that didn't work. Let's just do another workshop. We cannot keep doing workshops as I sit in this workshop telling you this, but we can't keep doing workshops. And it's the reason that we have been moving to a different process, right? Because effectively what we've been doing is teaching people to ride a bicycle by providing them with a manual that describes what a bike is, what it looks like, what parts of the bike there are, right? Describes the joy maybe we feel when we ride the bike. But nowhere are we helping people get on the bike and actually ride it. That book can't help you get on the bike and ride it, right? It's why those of us in California know, and I guess they're around the country, REI, right? They have bike riding classes that involve showing up with a bicycle and a helmet and getting on a bike. They do not have bike riding webinars. They don't exist. If you want to ride a bike, you show up and they teach you how to ride the bike by getting on the bike. It is hands-on. So at Rework Work, we've done the same thing. Like if you want to really practice DEI and embed it into your workplace, we really don't want to do workshops. We want you to practice, to do the work. Now, we've been doing workshops because, again, we go back to definition of insanity. That's all people want. And so my goal has been, let's put some nuggets of truth in there. And the people who are really listening are going to pay attention and they're going to go off and do the work. But if you're not willing to do things differently, you are going to continue to spend $5, $10, $50,000 on another workshop or a series of workshops. But what you're not going to get is a different outcome. So my question to all of you is, how are you going to practice riding the bike, right? What are you going to take away from this session? But we have to think about, well, how are we going to ride this bike? So 3 things you could potentially do, right? Review the talent pools that you're currently fishing in to determine who is being overlooked. Can you do that in your workplace? Can you take the time to really understand Gen Z and their values and start looking at alignment and how you can be more in alignment in your workplace? Or are you going to go back and do the why? Actually, I encourage you all to please do that exercise and really establish your why. But then the next step is practicing interrupting those biases. And so that is the work that we do at Rework Work. That is the stuff that we enjoy being able to help folks with that. And, because I have to ask the question of what side of history are you going to be on? Because at some point, we're going to look back at this time period, this 20-year time period that we are in, and someone's going to write a history book about what has happened. And you have to ask the question of, where do you want to be in that history book? I know where I want to be. Where do you want to be? So that is it for me. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, I have my QR code there. You can do that. If you would like to read my newsletter that I put out about leading with inclusion, you can do that. You can also call me. I really hope that this was helpful to you because I am available to advise, consult, and recruit. So you can reach out to me through any of these avenues and we will take questions.
Thank you, Stacy. So I don't have any in the Q&A, but there were several in the chat. And so I'm going to start with this. And thank you for providing a couple of takeaways at the end. First and foremost, people are looking for inspiration in this time, and it's hard to find it in the current climate. What gives you inspiration, and what do you suggest for folks that are looking for inspiration, perhaps in this particular session and beyond?
I will say, I think, and I'll stop sharing here. Hopefully you guys grab that if you need it. Inspiration. I'll be very, very candid with you. It has been hard. The last couple of weeks have been, I was trying to find inspiration for myself, much less to give it to others.
Yeah.
And I think what has helped me is just what I put on that page, right? The reminder that there are people who still want to see positive change in the workplace. We still want to see, and make a difference. And I have to find those people. And so that for me was my inspiration, was like, how do I identify those people? Because the people that don't care about DEI, they're not my people, right? They're not the people that I want to work with. So it's just like creating community. And to be honest, I've actually created an online community for women of color, not Black women, women of color and allies, because we needed a space to be able to talk about these and have these conversations. So that's part of what has kept me going, is realizing that in that space, people really, really need this, including myself.
Yeah, that's great feedback, and I too have struggled, not just in the last few weeks, but in the last year, with this work is tiring. Sometimes it's thankless, and to a point you made earlier, um, it's become a political football, uh, just using the term DEI. So as marketers, of course, we have to um, change the way we speak about DEI, because we're immediately turning off an entire segment of our population. So what's one tangible way we can start to speak differently about it, just in terms of like creating culture in our workplaces?
I think, it is, I mean, for the longest while, I've talked a lot about creating inclusive workplace cultures. So, I mean, still using the word inclusion is potentially problematic for some folks, but a lot of it too is just understanding that the foundations that we need, even before you can get to DEI, are emotional intelligence. So helping people with empathy, with how to have difficult conversations, conflict management, like all of those things feed into DEI, and they're needed more and more now. I think it's also part of the reason that it makes DEI very difficult, because DEI is like it's like third year college, right? It's like
Mhm.
taking third year college classes when you haven't finished high school. There's certain foundational components that we have overlooked. And it's why I'm such a stickler for companies that are that have training programs and that are making sure they're providing professional development, because there are so many professional development components that need to be in place before you can really try to layer DEI on top of that.
Yep, absolutely agree. So Danielle wants to know how you can spearhead inclusiveness initiatives at work without totally getting burned out.
You have got to make time for yourself, right? And like I said, for me, I really created an online space because I was thinking about what were the things that I need. And I kept looking in all these different places and I couldn't find what I was looking for. And a friend of mine finally said, I'm doing the same thing. I'm struggling. I'm not finding what I need. And so we just said, you know what, let's just make it. And so that is something that has been helpful to me. Now, not everyone's going to go off and create their own online space or, what, but you got to think about what are the things that bring you joy. And, leaning into that, like what brings you joy. And honestly, for a lot of people who've been doing a lot of work, they've got burnout, there's a lot of demands on their time. Sometimes you don't even know what brings you joy anymore because you haven't done it in so long. And
Wow.
so spending time to really think about what brings me joy,
Mhm.
and then how can I incorporate that into my month, my week, my day, right? There's certain types of things that maybe you can't do every day, but you can do once a month. Like maybe go to the spa, or maybe that's once every 3 months. But it's like, what are the things that bring me joy? And then how often can I incorporate them in? And if I can do one little thing here and there, it might be having some cookies and cream ice cream and watching your favorite show, whatever that is, but find it.
Absolutely. So I'm glad I have one final question. Thank you for those of you who stuck around to the end. Um, I want to get your feedback, and Stacy has a book that she wrote a couple of years ago called Unbiased, and I want to give away at least 5 copies of that book. So what I need from you is to send me an email at dei@smps.org, and give me your feedback. And I will send you a copy of Stacy's book. It's amazing. She's amazing. She actually, for those of you who don't know, was our very first DEI town hall speaker almost 4 years ago. And so I celebrate the progress that we've made as an organization, but obviously we have more work to do. So with that, please email me, dei@sps.org, and give me your feedback from the session.
I think
Last
there's a link
question.
out there too, right?
Yeah, we're going to post a link for overall survey feedback from the webinar as well. So be on the lookout for that. Last question. So one of my biggest takeaways was the disconnect between employers, what employers want and what employees want. What's the one thing that employers can do to help close that gap?
Listen to their employees. I mean, it's like, it's so not difficult, but at the same time, we make it really difficult. And I get it, right? There are different policies and all these different things at play. But I always say, I'll never forget, I was sitting in a meeting with the chief whatevers, all the different chief officers. And somebody brought up a topic and they said, and the CEO said, well, how are we supposed to change that? And I looked at him and I said, I don't understand. I was like, are you not the CEO on the door? You're the CEO, yes? I said, if you can't change the policy, then who can? And it was the weirdest thing. It was like in that moment, he went, oh yeah, I guess I could. But it's like we are so entrenched in these policies that we have in place. They have been written, I'm a fan of saying, like, they've been written like they are the tablets of Moses, never to be changed again.
Yeah,
Right?
right.
And they can be changed. They should be changed. We change and grow over time. So listening to your employees and finding out what they want and then actually implementing that is huge, and it can be done and it should be done.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I have a bonus question. I want to get David's question in since we have a couple of minutes. He wants to know, how do you effectively convey that you are an inclusive workplace to potential hires? I work in a heavily white male industry and we want to attract everyone we can. And
Be
industry is
honest.
engineering.
Yes, I would say be honest, right? So you can say, we understand what the optics look like right now, and we are moving. Here are the things that we are doing to move us towards a more inclusive culture. Things don't happen overnight. So we are doing A, B, and C. We've created a ERG group. We have an apprenticeship program. We are recruiting from HBCUs. We are making, like, what are the things that you're doing, right? And telling people and just being a parent or transparent with it. I find that sometimes when you don't have all the bells and whistles that you think you need, you want to hide and just say, well, we won't say anything. And it's like, no, acknowledge it, right? Be upfront. We get it. We don't have that yet, but we would like you to come in and help us. We're not putting it all on you. We're not saying you as the one lone Black person has to do this, but this is where we're moving towards. And we hope that you will join us as we move towards that, because we're not going to get there if no one ever joins, right?
Absolutely. We are up against time. Stacy, thank you so much for coming back and joining us. Thank you everybody for being here. This concludes today's session. We'll see you in 2025.
Sounds good. Thank you all.
This program has now ended. You may now disconnect. Thank you all.